This is the Generative AI Taskforce at the TUM think tank, bringing together a diverse team of experts and researchers who provide guidance to decision makers in government, industry, and civil society on issues related to the design, governance, and use of generative AI technologies. Today we're speaking to Djeffal from the TUM School of Social Sciences and Technology, where he researches and lectures on the relationship between law and technology, focusing on new technologies such as artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. So thank you, Christian, for being here today on the Generative AI podcast. And the first question we will start off everybody is where you see the greatest potential of generative AI or large language models in your field.
Specifically with large language models, I think it's amazing how they could enhance and augment knowledge workers to better deal with their jobs, to have quick and easy access to a large knowledge base, and also to outsource repetitive things like drafting letters. So I think that could, on the one hand, enhance productivity, but really augment how we deal with knowledge. And this is just amazing, being someone working with knowledge as well, but also looking at public administration or other fields where knowledge work is really important. So I'm really amazed about the possibilities this could give us.
Sure, it's very exciting times to see a shift in this workspace. But as there are opportunities, there might also be challenges. And could you maybe name one prominent challenge that you see within the field or mind that you would like to touch on?
Yes, so if you tackle this from a perspective of knowledge, I think transparency is obviously an issue, like also in the rest of AI, but it's really brought to another level because the question is, how did this information come about? What were the reasons behind it? And with large language models at the moment, there is a lot of statistics going into it. And I think it's important to think about transparency, not only of the current systems, but also how to increase transparency with the systems and what the level of transparency actually means for using these systems. Yeah, for example, large language models can compute a little bit, can program a little bit, but obviously the ways they are constructed mean that basically they don't know how to compute, but just use this probability. And it's important to know that in order to assess the system. So I think transparency is one pressing issue. The other issue is obviously how we deal with the creation of wealth through these systems. And recently there has been a lot of emotions of people whose data was used to build up these systems, and they have called for justice, have called for compensation. So I think that's another interesting issue. How do our systems of rewarding innovation function in such a setting where we build huge systems with a lot of data, and it's maybe too much to compensate every copyright holder? But on the other hand, the question is, why shouldn't copyright holders not be compensated for the value that is created through this data? So I think that's also a legitimate concern.
No, obviously. And I think that's a very interesting point that you now touch on, this kind of IP law questions that we're now also in a societal debate talking about, because I've been missing that from the debate before. Is there, or are there any points in the wider debate we're now having, now that ChatGPT got released a while back in the beginning of this year? Is there anything that you think where we have a blind spot that we're not talking about regarding these systems?
I think specifically in the larger IP debate, the question is how we deal with invisible work, because now Hollywood writers and novelists come forward, and obviously they have a good lobby and they can take up their interests, and their work is already protected by intellectual property law. But there is a lot of work of invisible people who look for data quality, who also do tasks in order to build up these systems, and their work is actually not at all recognized as creative and as worthy to be protected. On the other hand, it's really tragic that they abolish the value of their own work by training these automated systems. So I think this year, this triggers a larger debate about AI and justice and the way we construct these models also in a wider setting with business models and everything. I mean, how do we deal with this invisible work of people who make a big contribution but don't have the power to formulate the interests as other groups who might have also a very good claim, but other groups can do? So I think this this is something where we talk about that in platform work, but not in generative AI.
Okay. So also like the broader question of how the system kind of further marginalize people.
I mean, this could happen because if you think about the tasks that many of those models can do, at the moment we are shocked because it's, it's also about lawyers, about graphic designers, about writers, and people are really shocked that AI can tackle these complex tasks. But we shouldn't forget that simple knowledge work tasks are also threatened by that. And indeed, it's a question of justice and the problem of how to reward people or to let other people benefit whose work also go into that, specifically if their produced data is not protected. I think that's a general question of justice.
That is true. And given that these developments now we see take up so much speed and they're developed fast, we're now talking about GPT-5, etc. Where do you see it? I know you're not a fortune teller, but where do you see this going within the next 12 months, let's say? Is there anything that we can expect, like some broader changes in the systems or?
From my perspective, the interesting development is to couple the power of systems to understand knowledge with opportunities and possibilities to do more data-related performances, statistics, so to couple these both worlds. And we see this already in the field of programming, but I think there is a lot of more fields where actually you could use the input from language, but then have a separate functionality for data analysis. I think to couple both of those worlds will be powerful. And you can see, so now we're talking in July, you can see the first functions with the big models in that regard. And I'm expecting that until the end of the year, there will be more powerful functions. And we actually will have systems that can perform data analysis, statistic analysis, look into data and help us understand things that I don't have to program or I don't have to pre-configure myself, but I can kind of in natural language ask for things. And I think this will also, again, from a knowledge work perspective, will make these systems even more relevant and obviously also more powerful.
Yeah, no, for sure. And last question, how do you yourself use it? How do you use generative AI?
So the latest use that I'm trying is to use generative videos for the production of teaching videos. And this is really in the experimental phase. So I also try to find out, is this a good thing that we have this opportunity? But there is very good systems on the market right now. Many teachers have the problem that they often give introductions with the same content, or they just have to vary the content, but basically give the same introduction. So what I'm experimenting with is to have scripts for the introduction and an avatar, maybe a clone or another avatar who would actually give the introduction, which would give me the opportunity just to make small changes in the script and then have a general introduction for my students to free up more time for me to really think about the topics with my students, not having to give them the actual introduction myself, but to go straight into the discussion, but then obviously also being prepared. So I think this could give a whole new meaning to the term lecture, where we again talk more about reading in the script, but only that maybe the machine reads the script, and hopefully we have some time to have more interactions and more meaningful interactions in the classroom, other than me, giving the same lecture for the 20th time to a new cohort of students. And that's something we're experimenting with, but obviously you have to be cautious. You have to take into account the feedback of students and also the feedback of colleagues in order to find out, is this actually a good thing and a good development, but it's worth trying. And we're doing this at the moment.
No, of course. And I like that you're experimenting with it as well, because I think many things you can just trial and error and see if they work or not, especially with these new technologies. But as a student, I would be very interested in that, because from my experience, like introductory seminars or introductory lectures have kind of been similar all the time. So that would be interesting. That's just my perspective.
Well, it would be great to have your feedback as well. And I think what you say is definitely true. We are in a phase of experimentation. So I think that's also the fun part about it, but also the serious part about it. We need to experiment to be able to properly assess these technologies. And it's a great thing to be in the task force and also to be together with colleagues and students where I can learn a lot from the perspectives. And I think this is a mutual enrichment. of our work. And, these avatars are a small example of how this can work. So definitely I'll count you in for the testing and for the prototype testing.
Perfect. Thank you. I would be excited for that. No, Christian, thank you for your time and for being on the podcast.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you have questions, challenges, or use cases that you want to bring to the task force, write us at toomthinktank@hfp.toom.de.